Before I get too deep into Pro Tennis World Court, August 1988 had a significant event for the PC Engine. Now, there's a magazine dedicated to the PC Engine. Okay, right now they're publishing one-offs, but these one-offs become a proper magazine in January. The PC Engine hadn't really been getting a lot of coverage in other magazines. They were heavily focused on the Famicom. But now, there's a place dedicated for it, and it will last a surprisingly long time. Unfortunately, there isn't much in the way of advertisements yet, but we'll get there. Right now, you can just check out the fancy add-ons that Hudson and NEC are planning. Okay, back to Pro Tennis World Court. Just like World Stadium, this is a situation where Namco is taking a Famicom game, improving the graphics, and then releasing it on the PC Engine. Family Tennis was released at the end of 1987, and as I recall, I found it to be a little bit rough. On the other hand, I found World Court to be pretty good. You have a few options for play modes, and you might notice something odd already on this screen. That's right, it supports the multi-tap with up to 4 players. And this is finally a game that justifies that multi-tap that was released almost 1 full year before it. The other games that supported up to 5 players really weren't any different than passing the controller around. But here, 4 simultaneous players on the court. Regardless whether you choose to play singles or doubles, you have to pick out players. You have your choice of 18 thinly disguised versions of professional tennis players from the 80s, and they all have some pretty significant strengths and weaknesses. There are players that are strictly worse than other players. It doesn't tell you what they're skilled at in the game, so you'll have to read the manual to find out. With players picked, you've got your choice of 3 court surfaces, and then it's time to play. Similar to other tennis games at the time, button 1 does a strong hit, while button 2 does a soft one. You can aim the ball by pushing in a direction when you swing, and a consequence of that is that you'll often find yourself having to target a certain direction, just because you're running up to the ball. There's a few more fancy hits you can do based on timing. Use button 1 when the ball is overhead and you'll smash it down, or button 2 when it's really low and you'll do a big lob. The tennis here is very straightforward, and it plays pretty smooth. I didn't have any real issues with the controls, just with picking bad players. In singles and doubles, you just play 1 match, so you can choose if you want it to be a single set or a set of 3. There's no progression here. Once the match is over, you go back to the title screen. But there is another mode. The Quest mode. And here it's a tennis RPG, very much in the style of Dragon Quest. In fact, they did an illustration for the game parodying the cover of Dragon Quest III. You start out at a castle, getting a little bit of money and equipment from a king, who informs you that the evil tennis king has taken over. Hang on a second here. I can't do this especially often, but let's go check in on a parallel world. World Court Tennis includes an RPG mode. Visually, it's very similar to Dragon Warrior. When you start Quest mode, you're given the task of defeating the evil tennis king, who has been serving up punishment across the land. To smash his evil racket, you'll have to first travel to the 6 courts across the world, defeating his partners at each one. You have 3 pieces of equipment: shoes, uniform, and racket. These start out at F quality, and they're rated on letters up through A. You'll have to buy new equipment in order to increase your abilities. Equipment grade E is available in the first town. When you leave town, you'll sometimes be confronted by other tennis players who will demand a match. You can try to refuse, but unless you heavily outclass them, they could force you into playing anyways. And then you play a single set against that person. Win, and you get a big pile of money. Lose, and you go back to the king in the first town, but you get a small amount of cash as a consolation prize. The king is also where you go in order to get passwords that will let you continue your quest. I actually think Quest mode is the better way to play. Even though you're starting with a person who has all Fs and abilities, you're also playing against weak players. And so you have time to build up your own skill before the game really starts speeding up. This RPG quest mode is something that Namco will use again in another TurboGrafx game. We'll see it soon because it was released next month. Okay, we're back to normal. But there is a delay for that other Namco RPG, because there's a full year delay between the PC Engine releases. Pro Tennis World Court was pretty well regarded on its release, and Namco was so pleased with it they even made an arcade version. That arcade game would eventually get a sequel, though no home port of that sequel exists. As for how people feel about it today, it's become a bit obscure, but people are still fond of that quest mode. I happen to think it's one of the more approachable tennis games from the time. The quest mode isn't even especially long. It might take you 2 or 3 hours to play through the whole thing. Pro Tennis World Court is worth checking out at least for that.